Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
It's that time again for Aggressive Negotiations, your sweet, sweet taste of Star Wars heaven. And I am just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing. And we're so excited to be coming at you from, well, a planet that we're not really sure what to call it, but there's a very strange glow of force energy coming from the middle of it. And I don't know, I thought I saw Yoda and R2-D2. Anyway, I'm one of your hosts, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as he is every single week, is none other than Jedi Master John Mills. John, you're looking glowing this evening.
It's my aura. My force aura has truly taken over the airwaves at this point, and it's my true self revealing who I am. But
that's what that
more
is.
importantly, wouldn't the true measure of real ascendance from a Jedi be being able to get to that magical, weird force planet thingy without the use of a ship? Ooh.
No, I think it would be reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. That's really what
Even
it is.
better. Even better.
Please do that. You can also find us on social media, on X Twitter at The Jedi Masters. You can also find us with the entire network on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. You can also find us online at thenerdparty.com. And so we would love to interact with you on all of those places. And so please do. But John, something that the first season and the second season of Andor both reference is the Rakatans, who we know from the Knights of the Old Republic game are a very big part of that game in the lore of Star Wars history in the distant past. But, you know, we're also aware of things like this planet that Yoda visits, right, in the Clone Wars. We have the Mortis arc in Clone Wars. We've got this whole other galaxy in Ahsoka, and where then the Witches of Dathomir came from. And all of this just kind of weird stuff, right, that seems to connect us to a much, I mean, talk about taking a step into a much larger world, right? Something I was thinking about, though, for you, in the thought process that we may possibly be getting a film from James Mangold about, very early Jedi, the beginning of the Force, yada, yada, yada. Who knows exactly what it may or may not be and if it ever even gets made. But do we want things to give us more explanation around all of these mysteries? Or is there something to be said for allowing the mystery to stay a mystery and therefore allowing the audience to kind of make up whatever it is that they want in their own minds?
I'm pretty sure I've come down firmly on the side of leaving a lot of things a mystery, because the only thing you can possibly do is disappoint people unless you absolutely stick the landing. And by sticking the landing, and I know everybody's going to sit there, yeah, fanboy, all that type of thing, but sticking the landing is like Clone Wars. I never would have, if you had posed this question to me and said, do you want to see the planet that is the wellspring of the Force in the galaxy? I'd be like, that's a terrible idea. Why on earth would you do that? That's crazy. But then we go there in Clone Wars, as you alluded to, and okay, that was actually more delightful than I thought it would be, because the trick is to go a little crazy. What I mean by that is finding that wellspring of the Force and seeing all that type of thing. Like, we went a little crazy there. Like, it was, to borrow a term that we use in our circle, it's bonkers. It's not safe. And so the fear becomes, if they start going into explaining quote unquote things, then they're going to follow the urge of, well, we have to make sure it's a this or it's a that, or it has to fit in this way or that way. And honestly, the beauty of the prequels and the Clone Wars series and the Bad Batch and everything like that is, yeah, there's connective tissue that goes in, but it's not dictating what happens with the story. That's where I think the trick becomes. I don't think they're obligated to, and I would, if I were sitting there in their like little Jedi council chamber, I would be counseling them as a default to be against it unless they could throw an idea out there that wowed me so much. I'd be like, okay, just crazy enough that it could work if you let yourself go nuts with it.
I think utilizing those Clone Wars arcs is really the correct jumping off point for this discussion, because the thing about them is that they may answer 1 to 2 questions, but they then raise 47 in its place.
Yes.
And to me, I think that is the correct way to do this. That if you were, I think the same thing happened, and I was thinking immediately as you started talking, like, okay, yes, you can do this, but then what happens if you do it badly, right? Which most people got up in arms about the whole idea of the midichlorians from the Phantom Menace, right? But to me, what the beauty of midichlorians was not that they answered how people had the Force. What they did is they raised so many more questions then about this microscopic life form and how they are a part of every living being and all of this stuff, that it's like, okay, that what Lucas was actually doing was creating even more depth with even less answers than creating more answers, and I think that's the thing that people kind of missed. And so therefore, if we are going to kind of dive into some of these mysteries, which I don't think there's anything wrong with doing. I mean, again, I think the whole thought process of maybe even and or inadvertently or maybe who knows, on purpose, kind of setting up some ideas that they might actually utilize in an old Republic style setting, that's great to me. At the same time, again, I think there really are, I think you rightly put it, there are 2 roads you can walk down with this. You either walk down a road that allows some of an audience natural questions to be answered, but then naturally raises many more questions. So you're always leaving audience members with a sense of mystery. And I think that's the thing maybe that kind of Star Wars in general actually tapped into, right? Is that there was this sense of spirituality and mysticism and those type of things in this series that a lot of films at the time had completely gotten away from, because we had really dug into gritty realism in film. Right. And Lucas kind of rightly understood that the stories that stay with us tend to be one that have these metaphysical questions to them layered in, and they don't have to be ones that overtake the story, but they are layered in there because they're natural questions that we have as human beings. And so I mean, I think it's a really interesting question.
Well, I think that let's take the Mangold thing. It was like, it's the birth of the Jedi, quote unquote, whatever that's rumored. Cool. No problem with it, right? Again, so, you can do it right. You can do it. It's a trick. You're going to have to walk a tightrope. But I would offer that the source material from Lucas's day exists there, where I think it's the episode 1 novelization. Don't come at me if I'm getting it wrong, but I know I've read it in one of the materials that's quote unquote canon, whatever you want to call it, where knowledge, the Jedi existed before knowledge of the midichlorians. So if you're going to get into like the origin of the Jedi or something like that, an even more interesting movie to me is somebody who suddenly figures out how it all works. What you're talking about, the metaphysical question, where somebody's sitting there and they're like, why can we do this? How is this even possible? Right. And then you can get into things of like, the story of the first lightsaber. What did that look like? And we know that when Lucas was developing the sequel trilogy, one of the concept things that came out of it was, what did the first lightsaber look like? And it was like two pieces of wood wrapped around a crystal sort of thing. So it's like, that's what I'm talking about. You got to be willing to get crazy with it, right? Because if you have a movie that's being made by a conglomerate, oh, a lightsaber can't possibly work like that, blah, 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 blah. Whereas Lucas and the team he had assembled were free and willing to look at something and be like, well, what if a Jedi just made the crystal give a beam of light using the Force or something? And that in and of itself, to your point about raising more questions, points us in the direction of, oh, well, maybe the Jedi really have gotten really far away from their roots, because their most signature weapon didn't even need the technology that they've built around it in that modern age. And it showed their own sort of straying away from the true pure thing, which gets even more into Lucas's whole thing about like being as close to the natural world as possible is the way that you should be living your life. Like, you know, just having this discussion right here, that sort of thing gets in there. But I promise you, and this gets back to the warning I would have. Somebody heard the words that just came out of my mouth and said, "You're crazy. That's nuts. There's no way that's going to work. That's a dumb idea." Right? And it's like, you have to be willing, as Lucas was, to say, I don't care if somebody thinks it sucks. This is the story that has to be told. This is what's necessary.
Yep.
Two things, and not care whether people loved it or not. What was his quote? Was like he thought it was like building a house, and people said, you know, you should build a white house, but I wanted a greenhouse, so I built a greenhouse, and that's the house that I wanted, and I don't care whether you like it or not. I'm paraphrasing there, but words along those lines.
Yeah, one of the things you said there that I really liked is the whole idea is that there are a couple that really stood out. One is that you really truly have to have a very deep understanding of the Star Wars universe to be able to plumb these kind of depths, right? Because what you talked about was this idea that you're going to go crazy, but then when you think about it, it all seems to connect. And that's the thing when you think about, again, the Mortis arc or the Yoda arc there. This is way out there stuff. And yet it feels like it fits, and it feels in a way that answers, again, some of my questions, but leaves me with so many more. Like, you know, who are these priestesses that are on that planet with Yoda that have all of these different faces? They seem to be one and the same, you know, and yet different, and all of this crazy stuff, right? And yet the crazy feels right. And I think that's really the interesting thing to me, is that the crazy has to feel right, and you can do crazy and it turn into something else, right? It can come at you in a way that comes off like maybe some more of the, you know, I don't want to throw shade, but you know, it comes off more like the stuff you see in less successful versions of Star Wars that we've seen. I'll just leave it at that.
Less creatively successful versions of Star Wars.
Yes. And so, and that's where, again, I am going to come down on the side then when it comes to this question, which is that you can absolutely delve into these types of topics, but you have to do it in a way that makes me feel as though that I am satisfied with the answers I get as a person, and wowed because you just did something that I wasn't expecting, yet at the same time didn't leave me feeling like there were no more mysteries to plumb the depths of. That's the thing, is like they're always, this is the beauty of Star Wars, and I think this is where it kind of works the best, right? Is where there are always more mysteries to plumb. And you can do this in the most metaphysical way, right? Or you can kind of do this in the way in which I think like the Bad Batch or something like Andor have done, where it's like, okay, we have this time period and we're going to plumb the depths of what does it mean for the Empire to be ruler of the galaxy for almost 20 years.
Right? Yeah, I mean,
and there, even though those two shows exist, and as long as well as Rebels, I still feel like there's so many other questions that you could answer in that time period. Those shows didn't give me the end all be all, right?
I think that this gets to the heart of why anybody would feel trepidation about, an upcoming project having to deal with X, Y, or Z is I think we're both getting right back to that whole point of it can't be conceived of in a boardroom or blessed by a committee. It has to be something that's such...
I am not a committee.
Right. It's one of those things where it has to be something so unafraid of failure, but it's something that still gives you something to think about. I would say that Solo: A Star Wars Story is the same thing. Oh, well, he's got the Falcon, but we know that he's just about to work for Jabba. So what else is going on? That gets to your point about the questions. Oh, okay, you've answered these things, but there's still so much more I want to know about. And it's a gosh darn travesty that I'm not going to get that. Make another Solo movie just as an animated series or something, okay? Like the channel is there open to you. Just, you cowards, give me another Solo Star Wars Story movie. I don't care what the medium is. Have it as just like an animated flip book. I don't care, just something. Yeah. Anyway, it really does have to do with who's at the helm. And let me qualify it further by saying, if you have a really creative filmmaker at the helm, that's one thing. But if you have corporate directive shaping the story, that's where things can really, I mean, look, just not to put too fine a point on it. I'm not even talking about Star Wars in specific or Disney buying it just so that people don't think, don't get your hackles up sort of thing about that. I'm talking about, I'm going back and I'm revisiting some movies, through the years, stuff like that. I'm showing old stuff to my kids, new stuff to others. And I just watched Tommy, the movie adaptation from 1975 of The Who's rock opera. And the movie sucks. Sorry if I'm offending anybody. It sucks, but it sucks in a glorious way. You know what? Update the reference. It sucks in a megalopolis way. In that I love it. I love Megalopolis because it's fearless, because it's nuts, because it's unhinged. It is a filmmaker completely unafraid just to be like, boom, here it is, and walk away. And I spent more than $100 million making this thing. That's what needs to happen if we're going to get into this territory. The complete absence of fear in what you're going to make, and the complete willingness to be crazy with it, but not in a sterile, anodyne, or cynical way. We've gotten crazy in Star Wars. We've also gotten cynical crazy in Star Wars, and that is what the problem is.
Well, I do think that is the thing that, as you're talking about, look, Star Wars is made by an auteur who is telling his story, consequences be damned, right? He doesn't care because he's using his own money to tell his story the way he wants to, and whether you like that story or not, because that's the story he has to tell, because it's something inside him that was driving him, right? And I think that's kind of the thing that you're getting at then with if you're going to kind of talk about these types of depths in Star Wars, you have to be willing to just do what's best for the story, regardless of kind of whether or not people immediately love it. And the thing that we've seen, obviously, in Star Wars is that people have begun to come around to Lucas's way of thinking, especially when it comes to the Clone Wars, when it comes to the prequels. I mean, there is a new appreciation for those things because people have been able to kind of let go of their own preconceptions, come back to it with a different state of mind and realize, oh, that's what was happening. That's what's going on here. That's the thought process. And I think that's the thing of kind of doing the crazy, right? So much of filmmaking these days is about, okay, we just got to give people the same thing but different. And one of the things that Lucas was doing was not that. And especially, again, when it came to the prequel era and exploring some of these mysteries. I'm not giving people what they want. I'm giving them what I want. Because I'm the storyteller, and this is the story I have to tell for the universe I created, and this is what's coming out of me as the storyteller, not because somebody wants it, but because that's just what's there. And that's where I think, in all the conversations that, we kind of get, who should run Lucasfilm, and, is Dave Filoni too, is he got too much Star Wars lore? It's like, that's the dumbest question I've ever heard. Why? Because you can't have too much Star Wars lore if you're making Star Wars.
I think it's
George Lucas had too much Star Wars lore because he is Star Wars, and so anyway, that's probably a whole other podcast. But all this to say is, I think when it comes to telling these type of stories, you do unequivocally have to be unafraid to get nuts.
I'm going to give you two things here. One,
you want to get nuts?
Let's get nuts. I'm going to give you two things here. One, the whole thing is I understand when people are like, oh, well, maybe somebody native to Lucasfilm is too internally focused. They're not going to try to grow the audience. They're not going to try to get crazy. They're not going to blah, 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 blah. But then you look at Ahsoka season 1, it never even occurred to me that to go outside the galaxy before I saw that. And then I was oh, wait, why didn't I think of that? That's great.
So that's where we're going.
That's great. Oh, all right. You know what? Okay. We're going to the Hamptons. Anybody who watched Seinfeld gets that reference. And then I'm going to close with a contentious thing and go right into the sign off and not even give you a chance to reply. But we both heap praise on Lucas because he did I'm going to tell what the story is necessary. He didn't play it safe with the prequels. And when you play it safe with a prequel, that's when you get Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So Matt, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02. Of course, here on the network, you'll find me with Owlpost, talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. And then over on the TFM network, you'll find me doing a bunch of shows. One is the 602 Club, where we talk all about the franchises we love, and sometimes some Star Wars. In fact, we may be having a crossover coming very soon. But you could also find me doing a lot of Star Trek talk over there, so check all of that out. But John, if people wanted to catch up with you and maybe respond to what you just said before we went into the close, where can people find you?
Oh, nobody wants to reply to me about that. You can find me as Kessel Junkie on your social network of choice. You can, of course, reach out to us at thenerdparty.com/contact. We still have a couple of listener letters we're going to get to, and you can listen to me here on the Nerd Party on House Lights, which I think is a delightful show because it's usually me half drunk ranting at Tristan and Darren about why they're wrong about their movie opinions. And recently we've been talking about the Scream movies, and they're not horror fans and they don't know what they're talking about. So check out House Lights. But Matt, with all of that said, I think I hear the dinner bell back at the Jedi Temple. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.